The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Telly Olson. I'm back. I'm Ralph Tycho, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Kind of a somber one this week. My guest is Matthew DiBiase, and we are going to remember the life of both Larry King and Henry Aaron. This, for me and for you, Matthew, was very tough. We conversed on Facebook a little bit, and we decided that we got to talk about this on the air, as it were. Matthew, welcome back. You're a regular at Comfortably Zoned, and I'm very appreciative. Who do you want to start with, Larry King or Henry Aaron?
Let's start with Henry Aaron. I mean, for me, Henry Aaron, he was my first baseball idol, and he was always my baseball idol. I mean, I first became aware of baseball in 1973. I was about to turn 10 years old in August of 73. And, of course, what was the great big story of the 1973 Major League Baseball season but Hank Aaron chasing Babe Ruth's record. And every morning, the sports pages would just count down, okay, Hank got this one, Hank got that one. He was closing in, game after game, he kept closing in, and I was rooting for him. I was rooting for him, and I remember my parents got a couple of those pocket little biographies on Hank Aaron, and I devoured them eagerly. I got so I could recite them all from memory, and the more I read about Henry Aaron, just the more I appreciated him as a player. And he was a baseball idol who never let me down. Not like Pete Rose, with the gambling scandal and all of that. He never let me down. And throughout the decade, just reading his own memoirs, other people's biographies on him, the totality of his career just blew me away. And then when we lost him a few days ago, I just started meditating, and it just occurred to me that when he broke Ruth's record, I consider what he did to be the greatest hitting feat in all of Major League history. The fact that he was in a position to challenge Ruth's record, and the fact that he actually pulled it off, I think it's just absolutely stupendous. Not to denigrate what Pete Rose did in surpassing Ty Cobb, but the thing is, hypothetically, you could break Pete Rose's record by getting 4,257 singles, and that would make you the all-time hitting leader. But to be the all-time home run king, that's the ultimate hit. Just getting a base hit in its own right is a difficult proposition, and even the best hitters fail 7 out of 10 times in the major leagues. But the fact that Aaron could get that ball over the fence 755 times, and that he did it consistently. It took him 21 years to break Ruth's record, and he had to do that. He played the first 10 seasons under Jim Crow racism. The Civil Rights Act didn't pass until 64, and he started in 54. So he had 11 years in. He had to endure Jim Crow racism. He had to play in an era where beanballs were acceptable forms of baseball, unlike today, where players like Barry Bonds...
You get a warning after throwing at somebody, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And another thing is, batters today, if you notice, they wear that body armor. Like Barry Bonds always had the elbow guard. He had the leg guard. Batters today have those specialized helmets with jaw guards and the extra ear flap, and it really protects the eyes and all that. And hey, Hank Aaron did not have those advantages, and there are times when he got beamed. Guys threw at his head like Stan Williams, Vernon Law. He got hit in the head, but he got back up and he dug back in. And the best form of retaliation was hit it right over the wall. That was his retaliation, and the courage of that. He talked about it in his memoirs. It was like a test, and he just do you have the guts to get back in there, dig in, and just, do what you have to do and get those hits, the home runs, the singles, doubles, and triples, and all of that. And then, of course,
he was a hitter who happened to hit a lot of home runs.
Yes,
but he was a superb hitter. I think he 320 something lifetime average. Lot of doubles. He was fast. He had a good arm, and he was just a superstar, overshadowed in his day by Willie Mays, as everybody was. And I wonder if you take the flair and the New York press out of it, how they'd be compared. Willie was an entertainer and flashy as hell, loved that losing his cap, going around second base, all that. But Aaron was just nose to the grindstone. And I'm not taking away anything away from Willie. He deserved everything he had. But Aaron lived his life with class.
Yes.
That's another thing. And I want to call your attention to when Barry Bonds broke the record. Henry Aaron was classy enough to leave a message on the scoreboard. That's specially prepared. These modern scoreboards, they had his picture with a little speech. And he was absolutely gracious, did not mention the PEDs, which was obvious. But I do want to say, too, that the eras were different. Barry Bonds was facing pitchers who were steroided up, if you will.
Yep.
So let's not take anything away from Mays or Barry Bonds when we talk about Henry Aaron. But to me, Henry Aaron was the class, what he did for his hometown, his adopted hometown of Atlanta. He was just class all the way. That's the best way to say it. The best way to say it.
His was a quiet consistency. I mean, that was the thing about Aaron. He was always consistent. You knew he was always good for at least 30 to 40 home runs a season. I mean, he never cracked the 50 home run mark, unlike Willie Mays, who did it twice. I mean, Aaron's highest thing was 47 in 1971. The thing about Mays was streaky. He would have these great brilliant streaks, but also he would slump. He would have bouts of inconsistency. He might have seasons where he would dip below like 30 home runs and all of that. And also the thing about Mays was Mays did not age well. After 1966, if you look at his productivity, his stats really went down, whereas Aaron aged very well. In his final years, I mean, especially when he was in Atlanta, he was able to maintain. I mean, he hit 40 home runs at the age of 39, which is amazing. And
true.
Yeah. The thing was, Mays was the superior outfielder, absolutely, positively, hands down. He was the greatest outfielder. Not that Aaron was a fielding liability. And also, Mays stole more bases. He was far more prolific as a base stealer and all of that. But in terms of steadiness and consistency and longevity, Aaron was really right up there with Willie and all that. And you were talking earlier about Aaron could hit for average. Yes, actually, but before he went to Atlanta, his career batting average was quite high. But when he moved to Atlanta and he was hitting in Fulton County Stadium, he talked about this in his memoirs, he realized that ball was really jumping at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, unlike the county stadium in Milwaukee. And he made a conscious decision that he was going to play to pull. In other words, focus on home runs, because he was a spray hitter. He could hit to all fields. But in Atlanta, he played the full pull, and his home run totals went up, and actually his seasonal batting average kind of went down. He was still a career lifetime 305, but before Atlanta, his career batting average was much higher. But he was able to maintain his home run productivity, and actually moving to Atlanta ensured that he was able to break Ruth's record, because if the Braves never went to Atlanta, I don't think he could have broken Ruth's record at Milwaukee County Stadium, because lake effect winds actually cost him home runs, because Bill James talked about that in his new historical abstract. And at first it didn't occur to me. Then I got to thinking, County Stadium was an open shell stadium, and you're getting lake effect winds, kind of like Chicago, Wrigley Field. If it's blowing in, you could lose balls that way. And actually, the same thing happened with Willie Mays at Candlestick Park, because the early years of Candlestick was an open shell stadium, and hey, Bay Area winds must have played havoc with his home run.
He must have lost 100 home runs.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. If I could interview Willie Mays, I never did, but if I could, that is one question I would definitely ask him. Willie, when Candlestick was an open shell, how many times would you lose home runs that would have been home runs in any other ballpark? And the stats would have been very interesting in my view.
And Willie started at the Polo Grounds, which down the lines was an easy home run mark.
Yep.
But Willie was a gap-to-gap hitter, and he lost home runs at the Polo Grounds as well.
Yeah.
Henry took as good a care with his body as Willie did.
Yeah.
You could say a lot of things about how he aged, but it wasn't for abusing himself.
Right.
I thought Willie played much more of a presence on his team when he wasn't at bat. He was a coach in the field. Yeah. And he could have been the manager. He could have been they could have called him the playing manager. He had baseball instincts that were beyond compare. He could, crack at the bat. He'd be off in the right direction. He'd take routes to the ball which were superb, unlike a lot of guys with more speed, perhaps, or as much. There weren't very many with more. Yeah. Would take Willie Davis comes to mind, Vada Pinson comes to mind. They take routes that, wouldn't make sense, but they'd get to the ball or they wouldn't. Willie was like DiMaggio, right there, right from the start.
I remember decades ago reading an interview. Mays gave an interview, something I read in the Philly papers, where he would actually signal from center field to the catcher by positioning his body or his hands, like what pitches he wanted pitched. So he would position the outfielders and the infielders in such a way, okay, when you come in with a certain pitch, it'll hit in my direction. I'll be able to make the necessary play. I mean, he was choreographing things. He would signal to the infielders. He would signal to the catcher, using his own particular type of signals, what situations he wanted to create. In other words, where he could be able to make plays or someone else could make the plays, and all that. So, yeah, you were right, Ralph. I mean, virtually a manager on the field, literally. Seriously.
Yep. Hey, let's go to one of my other icons. Talk about him for a moment. Larry King. I'll ask you what Larry King means to you, and then I'll tell you what he meant to me.
Larry King, I think he created the concept of talk. I think people like Donahue, Oprah, all the others kind of all followed in his wake and all that. But, I mean, Larry was doing it for decades, long before anyone else. And, I mean, I came to Larry King very, very late. I think it was when he came out with his book, Tell It to the King. That's when I really developed an awareness, because I wasn't really much for late night talk and all that. I was in a sense, I was a little too young for Larry King in that sense, because we didn't get cable till like 82, 83 and all that. And so my level of awareness of Larry was limited. But I think what Larry was, he was that prototype. I mean, the length of his career, the longevity. I mean, I loved his books, Tell It to the King and Tell Me More, because, I mean, he was talking to, late Martin Luther King. He talked to Malcolm X. He talked to all the great political leaders, from Nixon to Carter, to Clinton, to the Bushes, to Reagan, all of them, the movers and shakers of America. And they were just, he was getting them to open up. I mean, I know some critics said, he was a little too soft and all that. But in a sense, he was trying he wasn't in the method of ambushing people. He would let his guests be themselves, as it were. In other words, he would leave it up to us to judge, okay, is this person, man or woman, truly sincere or not? He would let us be the jury. He would not play judge, jury, or even executioner. He would leave it to his public to make that decision, which in a sense is empowering. You got to appreciate him from that. He gave us the power to make our own judgments. I mean, did you feel that same way, Ralph, in your view?
Well, this is the thing that I got from him in this business, as if I'm in his part of the business. He had a curiosity that couldn't be beat. He wanted to find out about things, but not just from his standpoint, from his audience standpoint. So he would make it a point not to read a book of an author that was going to come on to talk about his book, because the audience hasn't read it, and he would ask questions as if they hadn't read it, and what do they need to know about it, and not put his judgment in the way. And he was able to elicit more than if he were well prepared, quote. He had this. He could get along with anybody, is what you were saying. And that's. If you could do that and have fun with it. They talked about what his 3 favorite guests would be. First of all, I don't know. The second answer was sense of humor, and the third, a chip on the shoulder.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't recall. Yeah. Well, the thing about Larry was he had a hard life. I mean, he survived. I mean, in his first book, he talks about that major heart attack he had. Was it like 86, 87 or something like that? They had to give him TPA to come back. Right. It was a brand new drug back then. He was a massive chain smoker, and that's what caused him to quit, when he had the massive heart attack and all that. I think it was like, didn't he confess like he was a degenerate gambler, and he actually faced bankruptcy? He came close to that.
He faced prison time. He was in prison in Florida for a while for some sort of fraud.
It was rough.
It was rough. He was brought up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Kind of a tough upbringing.
Yeah, he had several marriages and all that. I mean, he lived a hard road and all that, and yet, he was able to overcome those things. I mean, basically, he overcame his own lesser angels, and yet he created this enduring niche for himself. So, in a sense, even that is a triumph of himself. Sometimes the worst battles are not against other people. Your worst battles are against yourself. And if you can, conquer your own inner demons in that war, and that is like a newer strength, a greater inner strength and all of that. So you have to salute that as well, and that the fact that other talk show people drew inspiration from him and drew wisdom, from that too stands, in a sense, as a paradigm, as what to become and what you can make of yourself. I mean, even I with my own podcast, insignificant as it is, I try to emulate in that, try not to intrude too much, let the guests be themselves and let them project themselves so that others can appreciate, their talents, their contributions, and to, promulgate those talents and their contributions and all that. I mean, that's all it is.
It's not what you say, it's what you don't say.
Yeah,
and somebody once told me that you can't talk and listen at the same time. So
I'll tell you, here's a moment for me with Larry King. When Ross Perot declared his candidacy in 1992, I forget about, do you recall watching that live? I think I may have been watching it live when Perot did that. I mean, that was a moment in time.
I don't recall, to be honest with you.
But I think so, yeah. He proclaimed it right on Larry's thing, and that was a big thing for Larry. The fact that, Perot used Larry's show to kickstart his campaign, which for a time, I mean, Perot was like a threat to both of them, the Republicans and the Democrats. I mean, even I was intrigued with Ross Perot.
He had some good sense financially, and just as today, things aren't working in the government. And
I know.
He was able to identify it, and that same with Trump in a different manner. If you can identify what doesn't work, and it's not working anyway, it didn't work out for us with him, but it would have with Bernie, who... Did Bernie ever appear on Larry's show? I mean, I think Larry went off CNN. He went to satellite, right? So I wasn't getting satellite, so that's why I lost track of Larry King. Did Bernie ever appear on Larry's show? Do you recall offhand? I doubt very seriously, because I've been watching CNN talk about him for 24 hours, and they would have mentioned something like that.
Yeah, it's a pity. Oh, that would have been so interesting if Larry was still doing his thing on CNN. That putting Bernie on, that would have been a moment in time. That would have been so interesting, as it were,
Right. He would have gotten more out of him than the conventional interviewers today. I don't know why they bring some people on if they're just going to allow them not to answer the question and to say nothing, and good, have a good day. But why what's the interview? What did they get out of it?
Yeah, I know. It's blandness, the bland leading the bland and all of that. And I think that's why they're so afraid of Bernie, because Bernie's not bland. Bernie burns. He sets fires, and those fires inspire others, I mean, beautiful fires, fires of the soul and the spirit, motivational fires, to make a better America, to make a fairer America, a more equal, an equal America for everybody, instead of, the high and the mighty and the connected and all that. I mean,
the word socialism killed Bernie. And it didn't help to be a Jew.
I know.
I'm a Jew, so I'm saying that with love and realism. We are not very well liked.
I know. I mean, you saw those savages at the Capitol, the one with the Camp Auschwitz T-shirt, who now got arrested, and I hope they lock him away and throw away the key, and the other guy with the Proud Boys thing saying 6M. 6 million is not enough. Yeah, that's real nice and subtle. Really makes America great again. To see that's the future of America.
Interesting that he's saying 6 million isn't enough, but his brethren are denying the Holocaust. 200,000 killed. That's all it was. As if that's not enough to satisfy them. These are brain-dead people, and that Trump has control of them, or did have control. I really see him Twitterless and no voice anymore. He's got a billion lawsuits against him. That's going to keep him busy for a long time, state and federal. And you can't pardon yourself from state. And there's rumors that he did pardon himself and that he doesn't have to announce it until he needs it. But notwithstanding, it's the state that's going to get him, not the federal. And since we last passed, we were worried about how it's going to talk. Since time passed, since we talked, we were worried about what the end game was. Got to admit that, thank God, the end game wasn't what it could have been.
Yeah, but when you look at those people who stormed the Capitol, you know what they were, Ralph? Little Adolf Eichmanns, little Kaltenbruners and Himmlers and Goebbels, little Ilse Kochs, little Rudolf Hess, the commandant of Auschwitz's, Otto Ohlendorf, one of the worst Einsatzgruppen leaders and all that, all prosecuted as war criminals and hung, because they committed, murdered millions upon millions of innocent Jews, during World War II. That's what they were, little Eichmanns, enablers who made the final solution possible, murderers, aspiring murderers. And that's what they were going to do.
It wasn't just Jews. It was any minority, and it was homosexuals. It was Catholics at times. Although the Catholics did an excellent job of rounding up the Jews or helping the SS, but they suffered. It was not good. Not good.
When I visited Buchenwald. I mean, ladies and gentlemen who are listening, I visited Buchenwald in 2016, and there's a plaque there that talked about you had 6 million Jews, but you also had 4 million other peoples. They were not just Catholics, but also Jehovah's Witnesses, Christian Scientists, socialists, communists, intellectuals, even Allied POWs, because some escape artists who were persistent escapers, they wouldn't send them back to prison camp. They would send them to a concentration camp. You had labor union leaders, homosexuals, both male and female homosexual leaders. In short, anyone who had the moral courage to oppose Nazism could be condemned to a concentration camp. But of course, 6 million Jews were always first and foremost the ones who topped the list of those marked to be killed. And
that's because Hitler's mother was Jewish.
Whatever it was, man,
it put something in his head. He was beyond the psychotic. And I think you were right a year and a half ago when much more correct than I ever dreamed it would come to. I almost put my tongue in my cheek when you talk about their similarities and you're seeing things in Trump that reading Mein Kampf and what have you, but quickly he morphed into an autocratic, Hitler-like dictator, a wannabe. And they're saying now, today they came out with some things where he wanted to go to the Supreme Court yet again. He wanted to fire his newly appointed Attorney General to hire some guy that would go after the election results yet again. What do you do with the guy? I didn't think he would leave voluntarily. I didn't. I thought he'd have to be dragged out screaming.
Well, when he crapped out on January 6th, I think he realized the game was up. I mean, he fell short. In a sense, that was his Bierhole putsch. Just like Hitler fell short in 23 in Munich with his Bierhole putsch, the Donald fell short, on January 6th with his little putsch there. Not a little putsch. It was a very big putsch and all that. But he fell short, thank God, and technically democracy works. But the thing is, the fact that he's not in jail, that's still a thing. He has to go. He needs to be tried. He needs to be put before a court of law. If the law is to mean anything, he needs to face a court of law for his crimes, because I put this weeks ago. His whole administration was not an administration. It was a criminal conspiracy, just like the Nazis were a criminal conspiracy that seized the organs of German government and used it to destroy, the Jewish peoples and conquer all of Europe. Trump, his whole thing was a criminal conspiracy that seized the organs of American government in order to overthrow democracy and replace it with a fascist single-family dictatorship, as it were. That's my earnest belief, and it needs to be rigorously prosecuted. Like they did in Nuremberg, it should be done to Trump and his bloody family and his bloody enablers.
Well, two things scare me about his enablers. Three of them were in on, three of the Congress people were in on the overtake.
Yeah.
And countless police people from around the country took part in this. And they're the ones with the fervent belief in Trump and the weapons.
Yeah.
So,
they believe
scared.
I'm scared too, man. I mean, it's like, remember last time we talked, Ralph, on the show, Comfortably Zoned, that scene from Billy Jack, where Billy Jack, played by Tom Laughlin, said, "When lawmen break the law, then there is no law, just the desperate fight for survival." And hey, that's what it is, man. I mean, you got lawmen breaking the law, man, then, who can you trust then? Right?
Who do you call? I've always said, if you're in trouble, don't call the cops, call a hippie, because they won't come over and shoot your dog and terrorize your kid. And I don't know.
I don't know, man. Yeah.
Okay, my friend. You come back again real soon and keep up with life happening.
Yeah. Yep. You take care, Ralph. You stay happy. Keep smoking, my friend. Keep smoking, okay?
I've had a toke or two today, ironically.
One toke over the line, my dear friend.
No, one toke until the line gets there. I'm on this side of the line. I haven't gone over the line yet, but I'm creeping up on it. So,
God love you, man.
And when I do, I'll give you a call, and when in Alameda, California, and the pandemic is over, we'll have a porch party.
Yep, you got it, man. You got it. I love you, Ralph.
Right. Love you too, Matthew. Matthew, you're a joy to my life and my show.
And you made my show possible too, and God love you for it, Ralph. Okay.
Well, somebody's got you.
You got it, man.
All right.
Yep.
Be well. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. It was kind of somber, but we got it out there, and it's cathartic to talk about stuff.
Yep.
Be well. Adios. Thanks for listening.
Take care. Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.